Hey movie fans, I'm Law and I love going to the movies. The smell of popcorn, seeing the newest trailers on a huge silver screen. Going to the movies is my favorite pastime to do with friends and family. But today, I am so excited to be going to the movies with director Peyton Reed of Marvel Studios' latest installment, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
You ready?
Ready.
We are days away from the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. How are you feeling?
Well, it's exciting. I mean, we've been working on this movie for a few years now, and I cannot wait to put it in front of an audience. We're going to take the audience on a trip down into the quantum realm, further down into the quantum realm than we've ever been in any of the Ant-Man movies. So I'm really excited.
We're excited. I know the AMC fans are excited. So let's go to the movies with Peyton Reed. Here at AMC, we are excited to be offering this exclusive popcorn bucket where you could fill Scott Lang's helmet with popcorn for your snacks. But I gotta ask, Peyton, what is your go-to movie snack when you're here at the theater?
My go-to movie snack is popcorn, no butter, just popcorn, a Coke, and if I'm feeling fancy, some Junior Mints. It's particularly good coming out of the top of Ant-Man's head. Yeah. It's a whole nother flavor.
Thank you, Spider-Man.
Well, Peyton, you have some experience closing out a phase in the MCU with the original Ant-Man, right?
Yeah.
So how does it feel to be launching a phase with Quantumania?
Well, it's exciting because Quantumania kicks off phase 5 of the MCU. And it's interesting because we started Ant-Man, I think 8 years ago now. And when we started, Ant-Man was kind of on the margins of the Avengers, right? So it's really fulfilling for us to suddenly have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and Scott Lang is front and center. And he and the Wasp are going to be the first Avengers who go up against Kang the Conqueror.
You're an interesting man, Scott Lang.
I don't know who you are, but you've made a big mistake.
The first time you see Scott in the first Ant-Man, there's this ritual that happens when he is about to get out of prison, and a big guy named Peachy punches him in the face. And it really was the idea that Scott Lang is a character who's really resilient. Not just that he can take a punch, but he can take a punch and keep going. And I think it's one of the things I always liked about Scott Lang is that he's really the MCU's everyman, right? He's not a super scientist, he's not a billionaire. He doesn't even have any superpowers. It's all about that suit. For me, I think Paul Rudd's the perfect guy to play Ant-Man because he is like this generation's, Jimmy Stewart or Tom Hanks. And he reacts to these crazy situations in the way that probably you or I would if we found ourselves in the middle of the MCU.
Oh, look. It's like a little puppy, all happy and everything.
Let's travel back in time a little bit to kind of his journey.
You have a daughter, but you've lost a lot of time. I'm the man who can give you the one thing you want.
What's that?
Time.
We know time has always been a big theme in the Ant-Man movies. In the first movie, it's all about he was in prison and he lost time with his daughter. And that Scott Lang, Cassie Lang relationship has always been central to the Ant-Man movies. And in this movie, because of the events of Endgame, Scott, lost a lot of time. He was gone for 5 years. And Cassie Lang in this movie is now 18 years old. So that was something as we started working on the movie that struck us as really interesting and a nice progression, in this trilogy of Ant-Man movies. Because Scott maybe relates to her still as a little girl, when in fact she's now a young woman and she's got ideas of her own about, how to conduct her life and sort of what being a hero might be.
People still need help, Dad. That's why we made this.
She's a really idealistic character and I think has some very different ideas about what justice means than her dad. That struck us as fun as a father-daughter dynamic. But I think Scott Lang will always feel a little guilty. That was the other fun thing about Scott Lang is because one of his big dilemmas in these movies is work-life balance.
Dad, are you listening to your own book?
But I was ready for anything.
Scott Lang has written a book called Look Out for the Little Guy, which is, he was elected by the other Avengers to be the official chronicler of the battle with Thanos and also to tell his story about being a hero. And it's become a worldwide bestseller. So Cassie's a little critical of the idea that he's kind of looking in the rearview mirror and she's reminding him, Dad, there's still a lot of injustices in the world that need righting and, why are you sitting on the sidelines? So that struck us as a really fun dynamic between father and daughter. And suddenly we are thrust into this adventure in the quantum realm. And these things that Cassie has a lot of idealized notions of, she's suddenly put in the middle of a situation where there are people down there who are being oppressed by Kang the Conqueror. So she's really essentially put in the middle of a war zone, and all these ideals are put to the test. Catherine Newton is something, and you know, when I cast her in the movie, I was looking for someone for Cassie who could hang with Paul Rudd and Scott Lang, because, you know, Paul is very quick and you need a performer on the other side of that to sort of, you know, be the other person playing ping pong there. And Catherine has that, and she's just a very, you know, bright personality, and she's obviously very smart. She's also an athlete. She's really like a world-class golf player. And I needed someone in this role who had, you know, that level of athleticism.
Someone of that stature, if you will. Now, I do.
Nerd.
I know. Oh, God, if it wasn't obvious.
I have a suit.
Yeah, I noticed.
Now, let's think back, because there were so many cool opportunities with Ant-Man Shrinking Down. It's very like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, right? You get to see the world in a new perspective. But that bathtub scene in the original Ant-Man, can we travel back in time mentally? What do you remember from filming that sequence?
Part of the thing in the original Ant-Man is we looked at all the sort of great shrinking movies, Incredible Shrinking Man, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, obviously. And, you know, at that time we shot in 2014 was like, we want to do the state-of-the-art sort of shrinking. And a part of that movie was really bringing the audience down with Ant-Man to experience the world we all know, but to really be down in there. And suddenly something like a bathtub can become this major, major threat. That was one of the first things I think we shot for the first Ant-Man. So for me, it was really like, let's take all these advancements in visual effects. And, you know, when you're down by these old floorboards, you want to feel the grain. We had a whole miniature unit that did all the sort of shrinking stuff in that thing, so we could really make it feel real and tactile.
Speaking of getting smaller, going deeper, we're going to be spending a lot more time in the quantum realm this time around. When it came to visualizing it in such a big way for a full movie, basically, what were some of those conversations that you were having about how it reacted, what the environment was going to be like? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, the quantum realm was something that was not in the original scripts for Ant-Man. And when Adam McKay and Paul Rudd and I were working on the rewrites, we all remembered the microverse from the comics. And it's like, couldn't we engineer something in the third act of this movie where Scott Lang has to shrink down even smaller?
Oh, no.
And so we introduced that in the first movie, and it was amazing to sort of experience it a little bit more in Ant-Man and the Wasp when Hank goes down and rescues Janet. And then the fact that Scott Lang and the quantum realm became crucial in defeating Thanos in Avengers Endgame. That was great.
Right?
But as we look at the three movies and got to Quantumania, there were things that we'd set up in those movies we really wanted to pay off. And one of those things was, what was Janet Van Dyne doing for 30 years down in the quantum realm? So we knew we wanted to take the audience even further down into the quantum realm. So for me as director, that was one of the great joys of this movie, was working with this insane team of artists and, you know, concept illustrators and figuring out what the quantum realm looked like. Janet Van Dyne describes it as worlds within worlds and a place outside of space and time. And so it was designing all the different, you know, what are the laws of physics down there? What does it look like? What are the beings that you're going to find in the creatures? So that was one of the things that we knew we really wanted to sort of, you know, stun audiences by, you know, taking them down there. We shot in large format IMAX, you know, so it's very, very vivid, and I'm really excited for audiences to see that.
Holy, that guy looks like broccoli.
Obviously, there's a major threat down in the quantum realm with Kang the Conqueror, played by Jonathan Majors. When it comes to Endgame, obviously the Avengers, they performed their time heist, they were time traveling. I have to imagine that did not go unnoticed by Kang, and how does that affect him in this plot?
Well, I think one of the things that the audience will find out in Quantumania, there's a very specific reason that Kang the Conqueror is in the quantum realm. And, you know, one of the big things of the Ant-Man movies is family. And one of the things that we did in Quantumania is expand on that and really started to explore secrets that family members might keep from other family members, you know, the things they don't tell each other. And I think in the last movie when Hank and Hope rescued Janet, I imagine Hope Van Dyne had this idea that, like, I'm finally gonna get time with my mom after 30 years to, you know, really get to know her and ask her about her life. But what would happen if mom put up a wall and maybe wasn't so forthcoming about what happened down there?
Why didn't you ask me about it?
I tried, Mom. A lot. You never wanted to talk about it.
But throughout the course of the movie, Janet is forced to confront what happened down there. And maybe she met someone down there who had some horrible plan And that's about all I'll say about that. But that felt like Kang the Conqueror is not only an incredibly powerful antagonist, you know, he has dominion over time and he can travel the multiverse, but he also, it turns out, has a somewhat personal relationship with one of our heroes.
This is wild.
You know, in season 1 of Loki, Jonathan, of course, played He Who Remains. And he sort of implied that there's someone else out there who you may not want to meet. Kang the Conqueror, I think, is the most feared of all the Kang variants. And as you know from the comics, there are a lot of different Kang variants. But Kang the Conqueror is a very, very different character than He Who Remains. Kang has a grand plan for the multiverse, and he has a very clear idea of sort of how things should be run. And one of the cool things about Kang to me is he's not only battling our heroes, but you know, there's the idea that he might also be battling his variants, the other versions of him.
What are you so afraid of?
Me.
And speaking of villains, we got a glimpse of Modoc. First live action taste of Modoc, which is very exciting as someone who likes kind of the campier villains in the Marvel universe. But what is it like to be bringing him on screen? What can you tell us about this very unique character?
Well, Modoc was a character that when I was a kid and you know, read Marvel comics constantly, Modoc was always just this freak, you know, this grotesque character who is basically a floating head, but he's also a mechanized organism designed only for killing. So we had conversations early on about like, is there a place for Modoc in the MCU? And more specifically, is there a place for Modoc in Quantumania? And as we were formulating the story, we hit upon an idea that struck us all as very exciting. And so we do have Modoc in this movie. And it was one of my great pleasures in this movie to really bring him to the MCU.
Amazing. Now, you can get your tickets at amctheaters.com or the AMC mobile app. So grab your friends, grab your family, and let's go to the movies.